All right. Well, welcome back to Dominate Your Day. Today, we are interviewing and talking with Jennifer Robin Wilson. Jennifer has a unique story. As you know, we talk about authenticity and we talk about how to find that unique self. And Jennifer has done that. She's been a CEO and running a family business. And now she's written a book and now she's coaching. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Dana. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So, you had some pivots in your life, it sounds like. Yeah, so tell me about your family business and how you got in the position of being a CEO and kind of a little bit
Yeah,
about that, your transition.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So, going right back to graduating from university, my first career was actually as a registered midwife. So
Oh,
I
goodness.
delivered babies. Yeah,
Right out of
it's
college? Right out of
right.
college? Oh
Well,
my goodness.
I mean, I did go to school for that. So I finished my bachelor's degree, and then I got a degree in midwifery practice. I actually went to school in Seattle, but I practiced in Canada, and the laws for midwifery in Canada are a little different than in the U.S. So our privileges are more like a certified nurse midwife, if you've heard of that type of
Oh,
role.
yeah.
So we have hospital admitting privileges, and we can order lab tests and ultrasounds, and we attend hospital deliveries as um, kind of like as GPs. So yeah, so I did that for a few years and loved it.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a passion for sure. I loved being with moms and babies and helping them through that life transition. And unfortunately, when I was starting my own family, I had two little kids. They were 1 and 3 when my ex-husband decided he didn't want to be married anymore. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so
Big life
I
transformation.
talk about life transformation. So I was a new mom. I was unemployed. I couldn't practice as a midwife because I didn't have any on-call childcare, and I needed to, make ends meet. So I kind of fell into the family business. It was convenient. I could work from home. Around the time when I was looking for that work, the employee in my city where I live, just happened to quit. So there was a vacancy, so I really I was like, yes, I'll do that. Sign me up.
Wow.
Yeah. And at the beginning, it felt temporary. This was not my chosen career. It was something that I did out of necessity. And the more I did it, the more I fell in love with it. I really liked working with my parents. There were opportunities for me to make a difference in the company. And I had the chance to stretch myself as a leader. I never saw myself as a leader before that. And I began to understand how I could make a difference and that this could be a rewarding career for me. So,
How did you tell us about your family business? What was it? What kind of
yeah,
business is it?
it's a company that manages homestay placements for international students. So if you're familiar with international education, we partner with educational institutions like colleges and universities, high schools, and language programs. And they recruit the students into their program, and they need a place for them to live. So they would partner with an organization like us, and we recruit host families, so regular families from the cities where the students are attending school to live with. So we would find the host families, we match them with the students, kind of like a dating service, but we're matching students and hosts. And then we would manage the relationship once the students arrived in Canada. So we were on call 24/7 for emergencies, any, interpersonal conflicts that would come up. We were there to help mediate, obviously, supporting hosts with understanding cross cultural communication and issues like that. And really being there to observe and celebrate the connections that were made between those students and hosts.
So that company kind of rose to what, 150 people and you were the CEO?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, wow.
So when I first
Jumping in.
joined,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
God. Can't
I did
imagine.
work my way up. So when I first started, as I said, I was filling a vacancy of a local coordinator here in Victoria, in British Columbia. And over the next few years, when I decided that I was going to devote myself to the business, I went back to school. I got my MBA, And then I took over from my mom as CEO about 5 years after I had joined the company, and ran the company for another 12 years after that. So when I joined as CEO, we had about 25 employees. And when I stepped away, we were closer to 120, 150. Yeah.
Wow. So what were your lessons you learned there? I mean, it's great. It sounds amazing that you took the time to go back and say, okay, I like leadership, but I'm going to go get some training and get my MBA. So what were the lessons you took from that time of working in your family business and being a CEO?
Oh, so many. Where do I begin? I think a lot of what I learned, I mean, there's sort of different facets of what I learned. So I learned a lot about myself. So when we were chatting in the green room, I told you I kind of like didn't really see myself in that role. I sort of, as I said, I fell into it. So really
Mhm.
embracing myself and my style as a leader was a big lesson. When I was going through the MBA program, the focus was on leadership. So I got to study different styles of leadership and really start to see myself in as a leader. So that was a huge learning curve for me. And I loved supporting new leaders who were coming up through the organization as well, because I'd been there and I understood it. And I think in our society, there's a lot of people assume when they hear the word leader, they associate that with a very charismatic, outspoken, gregarious, extroverted kind of person. And leaders don't need to fit that profile at all.
Mhm.
So a lot of what I learned was how I show up as a leader and how to be an authentic leader. And then there's a whole sort of suite of learning around how to run an organization, how to grow a company. We were always virtual even before the pandemic. All of
Wow.
our team work from their home offices. So understanding how to create a strong corporate culture in a virtual setting across multiple time zones, working with people from different cultures. So a lot of our clients were agents and parents overseas who didn't speak English and who didn't understand the way that we operate. So working in a intercultural kind of business context was a lot of learning around that. Yeah. And then, of course, working with the hosts and the students themselves and everything I learned about how to nurture positive cross cultural interactions in a home environment, right? Like, this is not just a workplace, but like, how do people live together and get along when you have such different backgrounds? So I learned a lot about that too. And I actually wrote a
So
book about it.
one thing I kind of want to ask you before we talk about your book is working in a family business. How do you navigate that as a leader or
Oh,
as a
yeah.
yeah, do you call mom and dad? Do you have a name for it? Do you how do you put boundaries up and,
Oh,
all those
it's so
things that
good.
come along with the family business? It's then there's a
Yeah.
lot of them out there and a lot more coming into the next generation. So, one lesson you learned through that or one piece of advice for those out there that are working in family business or thinking about, working in their family business?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if there was one piece of advice, and it would be to hire an expert to help you if you're just starting out or if you're finding yourself navigating some interpersonal challenges. There are coaches and family business advisors who are specifically trained to help families work through these issues. So that would be the one thing I would say is get help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
And
Yeah, and so what I wanna talk and make sure the audience is listening to is you had a major pivot, unexpected pivot when your husband left and you had to start and you in an area that you hadn't thought, but you went and got the training, led, and then what caused you to say, "You know what? I think I'm ready to do something else now," after you had led the
yeah,
company? What was that pivotal moment that you said, I really am got a yearning to live more authentically of who I am now?" And I'm assuming your children are grown now.
yeah,
So what was that pivot?
yeah. It really started in the context of a program that I was enrolled in called Strategic Coach. And this is
Mhm.
a coaching program for entrepreneurs, and it was structured around four quarterly full day in person workshops. And I was sort of a year or two into that program and decided to take a weekend away for myself the Friday workshop of that quarter. And I was really doing some soul searching around feeling a little lost in terms of my direction, what I wanted to do, and quite frankly, I was burning out of the
Mhm.
role too. And so I
Mhm.
spent this weekend away. I took myself to my cottage and spent 2 days by myself with a journal and doing a lot of reflecting, a lot of which had been inspired by some of the exercises we had done in that workshop that quarter. And came away with a conviction and a decision and a plan to exit the business. And that plan was to unfold over the following 4.5 years. So it was not a quick transition. I knew that there were lots of major changes that we would have to make within the organization to allow myself to exit and have a new CEO run the business without me there. And I also wanted to tie up a lot of loose ends. There were still things that I wanted to do in the organization. There was a sense of legacy that I had begun that I wanted to make sure that I sort of solidified. So it was, yeah, there was a lot of steps, a lot of parts, and I made the plan and I executed it and I left on time despite the pandemic, which was quite an accomplishment, I think.
What, so did you leave during the pandemic or after the pandemic? Like right during?
So yeah, so it was 2018 that I sat down and made that plan, and so it was a 5-year plan basically. And the pandemic hit 2 years into the plan, and I stuck the landing. And I planned my exit or to coincide with my youngest son's graduation from high school. So around the time I became an empty nester was when I made this career transition, and so that was in the fall of 2022. So a couple of years after the pandemic started.
That's amazing. And I think one of the things that it takes courage to do something like that, but then how did it feel for you when you were starting to live this authentic self that you had yearned for?
Yeah, I felt amazing. And
Mhm.
I would say it didn't really I didn't really appreciate the joy of that transition until many months after I had left the business and started out on my own and was doing what I really wanted to do. And I think that surprised me. I thought as soon as like the day after I left the family business, I would be this new person. And it took, I would say, at least 6 months to even
Mhm.
just kind of recover from the burnout and really feel like I was myself again. And then
Mhm.
another 6 months to sort of explore this new self and kind of like try out these new things that I was doing before I could kind of like feel all the feelings enough to appreciate them and go, yeah, this is now I'm here. It took a long time.
So how did your understanding your unique talents, your strengths? I know you use Colby, and I know a lot of people have different talents, but you've taken the strengths assessment. So we'll talk about strengths and Colby in this. But what do you think it was in your Colby and in your strengths that played a role in this transformation?
Yeah, there's a few things. So, as a one of my Colby, my initiating Colby energy is as a fact finder. So that means I'm the kind of person who likes to gather data in order to make decisions. So I don't just jump into things. I do a lot of background research. I look to worked in the past, and I gather a lot of information from other people. So I talk to a lot of folks who had done this kind of transition, who had done the kind of work that I wanted to do in order to feel comfortable making a decision. So that's one piece. And I think on the strengths, I'm one of my top two or two of my top strengths are input and learner. And so input
Mhm.
relates to the fact finder piece, and learner is as a lifelong learner. So as I mentioned, I got my MBA when I was deciding to leave the company. And when I decided to leave the company and focus on my writing career, I went back to school again. And now I'm in a master's program to do a fine arts degree in creative nonfiction. So again,
Well,
I love learning and I love sort of gathering information and being the best I can at whatever I'm doing. So I think when I thought about the transition and what I wanted next for my life, I always wanted to write. That's something I've been wanting since I was in
mm,
grade 6. I had one of those amazing elementary school teachers who nurtured that passion and encouraged me. And
mm.
ever since then, I felt like that was one of my callings. And it was something that I needed to create space and time in my life in order to really be able to pursue that. Um, and then
What?
yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Keep going, and then I have a question after that.
So the other thing I wanted to just observe is one of the ways that I thought about the transition and how I would decide what to do next was to do a lot of reflection. So in terms of my strengths, like again, that data analysis, the learning, the input, like gathering information, and I recognized that there was a through line between all of my careers. You might say midwife, CEO, writer, coach, like what do those have in common? To me, it's quite
Mm.
obvious. And when I realized the connection, again, it was like the pieces just falling into place. I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. And the connection for me, even going back to my very first job as a ski instructor when I was 16, and then a sailing instructor the year after that, I've
Wow.
always been guiding and teaching people. I was a guide and an instructor as a teenager. As a midwife, I was guiding people through a transformative life experience. As a CEO, I was guiding my team to accomplish our shared goals. And now as a coach and as a writer, I'm guiding people to become their best selves. So that's the connection for me. And when I figured that out, it was like, yeah, bingo.
And you know what's interesting is you've taken the strengths twice, and I think the first time both times you had your input and the learner. But what's interesting is your connector popped oh, up when we were talking, and it looks like your connections that you just made, that through line you just made, showed that whole mystery of
Yeah,
that red thread of consistency through everything you had done.
that's right.
Which is really powerful. So one of the things I love about strengths is they've been with you since you were a child. So I loved your story about, teaching when you were 16 and having a teacher that really poured into you for writing, and how you didn't really get to write until just recently, right? I mean, you've
That's
written a
right.
book. So
Yeah.
how did you make that pivot to write a book? What did tell us about the book? What's it about,
Hmm.
and how did you use your strengths to help you boost you to get that done? I mean, because you did that
Yeah.
pretty fast.
Well, not pretty fast. I had the idea to write the book about Homestay 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and if you meet people who work in international education, like many professions, they often will say, "Oh, we've got so many stories, we could write a book." So I'd heard that many, many times over the years. In the darkest moments, you kind of have to look for the humor, right? So we would be
Yes.
struggling with a challenging case, and we'd say, "Oh, this belongs in the book," right? So it was always kind of this idea in the back of my head that that would be something that I ought to do and that I could do well. So I started interviewing hosts back in 2015. I was like declared that I'm going to write this book and I'm going to start gathering the information I need for it. And it was very stop and start. I would do 3 or 4 interviews, and then months and months would go by with no progress on the book. And then I would say, create another goal. I'd be like, this year is going to be the year. And I'd interview some more hosts. And then again, things would, life would take over. So I struggled with it for a long time. I was hard on myself because as you notice, I'm an achiever. When I
Mhm.
first took the Strengths Finder, when I was working as a CEO, I I loved the achiever. When I read that the first time in 2015, it made perfect sense to me. The phrase that stuck out was, "I start every day at zero." And that's
Mhm.
definitely how I felt like, no matter what I had accomplished before, there was a new accomplishment, new goals that I need to achieve the next day. So the book was definitely one of those things that I felt frustrated that I couldn't achieve. And I realized, as time went by, that um, and when I realized that I was actually struggling with burnout, that I was working in Homestay 9 to 5, if not 8 to 10 every day. And for me to take the time out of my evening downtime to sit down and start writing about Homestay was just felt like more work. And it
Right.
wasn't feeding my soul. It wasn't nourishing me. It was dragging me back into the stress of my daily job. And I really couldn't manage it. So part of the decision to leave CHN was tied to this long standing goal that I had of like wanting to have time to write the book. So so it wasn't until I stepped away from my full-time job that I really could devote myself to this project. So it meant uh, you know taking more time to finish out the interviews that I needed to do, and then sitting back and trying to analyze all this data because I'd done dozens of interviews. I had a lot of data from the surveys that we'd conducted, and I had read tons of books about psychology and cross-cultural communication and bias and all this other stuff I wanted to weave into the book. So that's where, when you ask about strengths, I think my connectedness strength
Mhm.
comes into play, is being able to see the patterns and step back enough to capture the bigger picture of what it is that I wanted to convey to my reader. And then once I landed on the structure, the writing was really easy. So I had to plan it out first. Some writers will just sit down and write by the seat of their pants. They're called pantsers.
Yes,
I'm
I love that answer. I have
yeah,
not
so
heard that term.
that's right. So you're either a pantser or a plotter, and so I'm more of a plotter.
Oh,
Yeah, I
me
needed the
too.
structure.
I'm
Yeah,
definitely a plotter, but I love that pantser. I think I'm married to a pantser.
there you
Um,
go.
there's always one, right, in every family. It's interesting that you have individualization too. And you
Yeah,
talked about individualization is a customizer. So, who is this
yeah.
book for?
Yeah, so the book is for host families, so people who um, bring international students into their homes. You can also, I mean, I think it would also be relevant for people who bill it. That's maybe a more familiar term for a lot of people. But the book focuses, like a big chunk of the book focuses on cross-cultural understanding. So people who bill it, a local hockey player who's, in town for a tournament, it's going to be a different experience than someone who takes a foreign student into their home. Um, so yeah, it's for host families. And the individualization you mentioned, I think, is really important because one of the secrets of cross-cultural relationship building is seeing people as individuals, not
Mm,
as their country or their culture or their nation. I think both are important, and in order to really connect with people and understand them, it's important to see them as an individual.
So you've made this big pivot from CEO to now finishing this book that you had been working on since what, 5 years before that, 5 or 6 years before that,
Yeah.
to now, okay, you've written the book, but what has been your yearning, your calling that you're just now starting to bloom in that's coming out?
Yeah. I think it's this ability to make a difference with people, both at an individual level and at a collective sort of group level. So I when I was imagining my ideal career, it was never one or the other. I didn't want to be the full-time author sitting behind my desk, not connecting with people. I needed the interaction that I've had throughout my whole career with people. So I wanted to have the ability to write and the space to write, but I also wanted to continue to connect and make a difference. So that's where the coaching and consulting comes in, and I'm still early days in that business as an entrepreneur. And I am excited about the opportunity to really start making a bigger difference with organizations and teams and individuals as a coach and consultant.
Well, and I think we talked about this in the green room. The fact that you were in your family business for so long, and there's so many, that's a natural opportunity with coaching right now, right? With people,
That's right.
but being able to go into different organizations and use that same skill and
Mhm.
work with them. So, what are your biggest lessons that you want to share with those people who are ready to make a pivot and a big one?
Mm.
That that you wish somebody had told you as you were doing this because you did a lot of research. You did a lot of research. You had a support system. It sounds like you had a
I
plan.
did.
You had
Yes,
a
I
way.
did. Yeah, and I hired an executive coach to help me in that final year as I was leaving the business to help make sure that transition as part of my so after I'd announced to my successors what was happening, I gave them 18 months notice, I think. So yes, that last year, I would highly recommend working with an executive coach who can help you focus on your goals and follow through. You know, coaches. I think some people make the mistake of thinking they can coach themselves because coaching on
Oh,
the surface sounds like you're just asking me questions and you help me come to the decision myself, and it's that's true, but you can't coach yourself. So there's that, and that's been shown both through just anecdotal evidence, but also neurological studies. Like when we look at people's psychology and the way their brains work, you need an external voice, somebody else who's outside of you to hold that mirror up and help you understand your strengths and to lean into them. So, yeah, I think my favorite term when I think about what a coach does is that they're a thinking partner. Um,
mhm.
that's the definition that I like to share with people. And yeah, so that would be my main advice. If you're going through a major transition, if you're trying to figure out what's next for you, take some time. Like, don't feel like you have to rush into anything. I was given that advice and I didn't follow it, and I think it was really good advice. But
Mhm.
yeah, and then number two would be to hire a coach.
We kind of have a saying around other coaches and people that I, work alongside. And it's like all of us, everybody needs a coach. I don't
Yeah.
care. And I love that you mentioned that, like, get a coach if you are in a transition, or get a coach, anytime, whether you're
Mhm.
in a family business. I think that was your first, admission is that we needed somebody to come in and help. And now
Yeah.
you're going to be able to do that with people because of your experience and because of the book just happens to be a love of your experience in teaching others what you learned and telling the stories cross culturally, but
Yeah.
now you're creating new stories.
That's right.
So yeah, as we get ready to close out, is there anything that's coming up for you, that you want to share with the audience about your transitions and finding your authentic self, that you want to make
Mm.
sure that they hear that we didn't get to mention?
Um, I think there's two things that sort of overlap with a lot of the stuff we've talked about. And they're I know you, Dana, talk about values with your clients, and it's a huge part of my work with my clients as well. It's kind of the secret to everything, like along with
Yes.
strengths. Yeah. So I want to encourage people to explore their values. And I'm surprised by how many folks will come to work with me and who have never done that work before. So there's lots of exercises you could do online. Or if you work with a coach, they'll probably give you some tools to use to try to figure those out. But the two of the values that have really served me well through these transitions are humility and curiosity. So if I could
Mm,
leave the audience with that, sort of like just drop those little seeds out there,
mhm.
and they work both in when you're exploring yourself and trying to figure out what's next for you, but they also work if you're struggling with interpersonal conflict or cross-cultural work
Mm.
settings. Humility and curiosity will take you very far. And leadership and working in a family business, like all of these settings, I think those two have really served me well.
I love that. Okay. Well, here's a little trick or something that I talk about a lot with values is which of those match with your strengths? Because they always do.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which
um,
which of yeah, what does humility match with and what does um curiosity match up with?
I think humility might match with individualization. Would you
Mhm.
agree? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think curiosity matches with input and learner.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's neat because it might be one or two of your strengths. Even when you pull, right now, we're just talking about your top five, but when you pull your full 34 report, and this is an exercise I have people do is, write down your values, then write down your strengths, and they always match.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
kind of like your values are a doorway to your strengths. So it's kind of fun when you start seeing that and going, oh my gosh, no wonder. The other thing I want to mention is that both of those, humility and curiosity, equal trust. So
Yes.
that is a cool way as a leader, as a coach, to bring trust to your clients, by
Oh,
sharing
I
that.
love
And,
that.
they probably feel that,
Yeah.
so just dropped a little.
I love it. Good one.
Yeah, yeah. So, if people want to learn more about your book or follow you or learn about your coaching, what is the best way that they can reach you, Jennifer?
Yeah, so my social media handles are all Jennifer Robin Wilson, and I have a website too, jenniferrobinwilson.com. So that's how you can find me online. And my book is available February 18th anywhere you buy books. And I love to support independent retailers. So if you have a little local bookstore you like to shop at, that's where you can ask for it to be brought in if it's not there already. So it's called The Heart of Homestay, Creating Meaningful Connections When Hosting International Students.
I love it. I love it. I love how you are in this new space. I can't wait to check with you about a year from now and see how things are
Yeah.
going. So it's exciting. So
Awesome.
congratulations on the book, and congratulations on becoming more of you and doing, what you're choosing to do. So
Thank
it's
you so much,
exciting.
Dana. Yeah, it's great.
Thank
Thank you.